Good evening, and thank you for tuning in online tonight to our Wednesday night broadcast at Victory. We're so thankful for each and every one of you that tunes in for all our services, whether it be on Sundays or Wednesdays. We're just very, very thankful for that. One of the things that we strive to do here is to develop a deeper walk with the Lord as well as deeper connections with one another. And we do that through groups, small group settings that meet here on campus. And we would love for you to be a part of these groups if you aren't already. We have multiple times that they meet, Sundays and on Wednesdays. Tonight, right after we hear from some special music from our worship team, we're going to move into one of those groups and let you hear and experience the teaching. We hope and trust it's a blessing to you tonight. Thank you so much again for being here this evening.
He's good on the mountain, He's good in the valley low, He's good in times of trouble, that's why I love Him so. He's good while I'm sleeping, He's good when I'm on my knees, He's good though I'm unworthy, He is good to me.
I don't worry when the skies are gray, I don't bother with the darts that Satan throws my way. For the one who cares for sparrows and the lilies of the field, He's the one who calms the violent storms when He says, peace be still.
He's good on the mountain, He's good in the valley low, He's good in times of trouble, that's why I love Him so. He's good while I'm sleeping, He's good when I'm on my knees, He's good though I'm unworthy, He is good to me.
How many of you know that God's good in your life? Say amen. In the sunshine and in the rain, He's still the King of Kings, He remains the same. He's faithful to His children, and His promises are true. If He says He'll always be there, then that's exactly what He'll do.
He's good on the mountain, He's good in the valley low, He's good in times of trouble, that's why I love Him so. He's good while I'm sleeping, He's good when I'm on my knees, He's good though I'm unworthy, He is good to me. Oh, He's good on the mountain, He's good in the valley low, He's good in times of trouble, that's why I love Him so. He's good while I'm sleeping, He's good when I'm on my knees, He's good though I'm unworthy, He is good to me. He's good while I'm sleeping, He's good when I'm on my knees, He's good though I'm unworthy, He is good to me. He's good though I'm unworthy, He is good to me.
Alrighty, and good day to everybody. We are going to pick up, hopefully, today we'll be able to get through the text today, 1 Samuel 17. I sent that out in the group messaging early this morning. Maybe if you wanted to get a jump on it, you can do that. Super familiar passage of Scripture. It's David fighting Goliath, all right? But there's a lot in this particular account here. I think if we can unpack it a little bit, it will help us in some areas of our life. You say, well, I'm not really a leader. I'm going to share some leadership principles in David's, but really it's just being a successful Christian, really, in a lot of areas. You don't have to be a leader, but everybody's a leader to some degree, right? Everybody has somebody they are responsible for or they're taking care of, they're being an example to or a role model to. And so there's a lot of things we can learn from there, but just in life in general. And David, from feeding sheep, right, to fighting giants, to facing, the construction or financing the construction of the temple. He was of the tabernacle. He was a great leader. And we learn a lot of things from his life. And I want to take one of the more well-known moments of his life and expound on them as David the giant killer. So if you're going to take some notes or whatever, we're talking about the 10 leadership principles from the life of David in this particular situation. I can give you 10 principles from his life when he, sinned, with Bathsheba that we can learn from as well. But this is from this particular instance in his life. So just a quick background. Just one chapter previous, in chapter 16, Samuel is when he anointed the unlikely son of Jesse, which was David, right? He was the one that wasn't up there at the feast at the beginning of it. He was the one that was still out in the fields working with the sheep when Samuel went to town, knowing by God that he was going to anoint one of his sons. And he was brought from the field. We understand that. But he was anointed to be the next king of Israel. They'd be a few years, obviously, before that would come to pass, but God's hand was upon him, and the Holy Spirit of God resided with him. So we come to chapter 17 then, we've got a, what I'd call a, quote, situation that called for some pretty substantial leadership. And so let's pick it up right there. 1 Samuel 17, let's look at verse number 1. And I did not grab the right. Let me hang on a second here. Let me do this. 1 Samuel 17. Yeah.
Need me to go grab something?
No, sir. I got it right here.
And you've got water on the shelf.
Thank you, sir. All right. By the way, I will be out of town next week, next 2 weeks. But I've asked somebody to come in and do a series for us for a few weeks right there. But I don't want to tell you who it is yet because I'm not sure if it's going to be able to work out. So I'll let you know that. 1 Samuel 17. Look at the first few verses. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shokelah, which belonged to Judah, and pitched between Shokah and Azekah in Ethsedem. Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Eli, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. You remember when I went to Israel last year, I was here at this valley, saw this. It came alive. It's a very small area in comparison to what I imagined in my mind of where this battle took place. And so legitimately, I could see, somewhere in that area, David and Goliath did battle down there. And I see the brook where he grabbed the stones from. I brought some of those stones back, right, from that river, from that creek. It's not really a river, it's a creek. And so seeing this and seeing how it is and where Goliath would have been and where the Israelites would have been camped and that distance there and it was just it was very surreal to see that. And so here they are, one on the other side and one on this side. Philistines on the mountain and Israel on this side of the mountain. There went out a champion of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits in a span. And by the way, I was looking at that, I was thinking, you could see a big dude. You could tell that's a big man from the distances there over. It wouldn't just be like a little bitty speck. You could tell that would have been a big guy there, especially compared to the other guys. Verse number 4 and so on there, it talks about how big he was and what he had, his helmet of brass, and it talks about his armor and his 7, talks about this spear and the spear's head and all that kind of stuff. Verse 8, he said he stood and cried to the armies of Israel and said to them, why do you come out to set your battle in array? Am I not a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. And if he be able to fight with me and kill me, then we'll be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. So the idea here was, hey, let's just cut to the chase here. There's no sense in a lot of bloodshed going on. We'll just have a one-on-one here, and winner takes all. And that was kind of the mindset. Well, this is kind of an unfair advantage, right? I mean, that'd be like me talking to the 4th graders, I'm saying, all right, let's arm wrestle, all right? And if I win, all the 4th graders buy me ice cream, If y'all win, I'll buy y'all ice cream, Send me a guy. I don't care how big that 4th grader is. the odds are I'm going to beat them. You know what I'm saying? Kind of unfair advantage. And this is what we see what's going on right here. The Philistines said, I defy the armies of the living of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. And so he's getting a little personal, right? He's talking about God. He's talking about their God, the living God. And when Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed. They were greatly afraid. Now David, he was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse. And he had 8 sons, and the man went among men for an old man in the days of Saul. The 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. And the names of his 3 sons that went to the battle were Eliab the firstborn, the next to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. So they're in battle. They're on the front right there, all right? David, he's not there. He went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. The Philistine drew near morning and evening and presented himself 40 days. So this went on for more than a month. Every day he comes out, does the same routine, same song and dance. Send me out a man that we may fight. And Jesse said to David, his son, well, what's going on? They didn't have email. They didn't have social media, right? They didn't have couriers. We need to figure out what's going on. Take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn, these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren. Carry these 10 cheeses into the captain of their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. Go see how the boys are doing. Here's some food. Take it to their captains, to tell them I said hello. We're checking on things. Now, Saul and they and all the men of Israel, they were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. David rose up early in the morning. He left the sheep with the keeper and took and went as Jesse commanded him. And he came to the trench as the host was going forth to the fight and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage and ran into the army and came and saluted his brethren. Hey, I got to get mine too, so if you need to get it, go ahead, okay? No worries there. And so he leaves his carriage over there. He runs up and talks to them. As he's talking with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Goliath by name, out of the army of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. So he started his little daily spiel, and David hears him. All the men of Israel, when they saw that man, they fled from him. They were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, have you seen this man that's come up? Now, we'll get to that in just a second. So you see the context right there. Verse 24 verses, this battle is at hand, and the guys are afraid from the armies of Israel. David comes on the scene, and he hears and he sees it. All right? So there's a problem then. David has it's a giant problem, right? We could say a big, big problem. And here's where we see the first of these 10 leadership principles I want to share today. Good leaders take ownership of problems. All right, there's no alliteration here. These are just 10 facts. All right, leaders take ownership of problems. Look at verse 25. The men of Israel said, have you seen this man's come up? Surely to defy Israel is he come up, and it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. In other words, man, whoever beats this guy is going to be honored. He's not going to pay no taxes. He's going to get to marry the princess. I mean, there's a lot on the line here, and it sounds good, but look, you got to live to be able to, get married, right? You got to live in order not to have to pay taxes, right? You got to live in order to get these rewards here, and the odds were not stacked in your favor that you would do that, taking on this giant. And so David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine and taketh away the prey from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Why are we allowing him to do this? And the people answered and said, well, here's what's going to be done. You get to marry the daughter and so on and so forth. Verse 28 says, Eliab his eldest brother heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David his younger brother. He said, why comest thou down here? With whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? He's belittling him. He says, you're not that important. Man, you got a few sheep to take care of. Who's taking care of them? He said, I know your pride. I know what you're doing here. I know the knowledge of thine heart. Thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. You're just a nosy little kid. You just want to get away and not have to work and see what's going on. And David said that famous, line, that famous phrase, question, what have I now done? Is there not a cause? And David took it personally. All right? as a young man, this problem affected his beliefs. It was no longer their problem, the Israelites' problem, those in the army, right? It became his problem. He took this on himself. Many people have said, dude, Brother Eliab, y'all got a problem here. I'm going to head on back now, take care of the sheep. By the way, here's the cheese. Dad said hello. He sends you his love. We'll catch you later, man. All the best to you, right? And got out of Dodge. That's what most people have done. But that's not what leaders do. That's not what David did. And David says, we got a problem here. What's the solution? How are we going to handle this? What are we going to do? How are we going to fix this? He didn't run from it. And until we realize the problem that we face in our areas of life, in our Christian life, in his leadership, and we take it personally, take ownership of it, then we're never going to be really successful. We can't keep running from problems. We can't keep kicking them down the road, right? We got to say, all right, there's an issue here. There's a problem right here. What are we going to do with it? And take it personally. We cannot look at the situation in our lives, in our marriages, in our businesses, our ministries, and truly lead if we don't take ownership of it, all right? So that kind of leads us to the second leadership principle that we see in David's life. Leaders are developed when they see the need and then take the lead, right? When they take action on it. Verse 32, David said to Saul, because word got around that, hey, there's this kid in town and he says he can do this and he can fight the giant. And why would any soldier take a young kid up to the head of the military and say this guy could do it? That, to me, it's like, really, you're going to bring this kid up here to do this? Because it wasn't like David was toe to toe with this giant. It can match him, and so David comes to Saul now, and he's trying to tell the king. He says, look at verse 32. Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with the Philistine. So leaders are developed when they see the need and they act on it. That's the principle that I'm trying to teach right here. David wasn't looking for a challenge, all right? But he didn't back down from one either. He didn't come to the battle that day looking to figure out how he can get involved. He came to do the bidding of his dad. But when he got there, he realized there was a problem. A popular quote on leadership teams is, see the need, take the lead, right? We've heard that before many times. And David does it right here. King, don't worry about it. You got a problem out there, I get it. Look, don't let your heart fail you. Don't let anybody else's heart fail him for that matter, because of this giant. I got this. I don't know of many leaders who go around, or Christians in general, looking or hoping for a problem. Nobody's really walking around going, man, hope I got a problem today. Come on, knock it in the head. No. They're going to find you. You don't have to look for them, right? And so no one really does that. But I do know a lot of folks that respond when they are faced with those. And then the more successful men and women that I know, when they see the problem, they say, all right, here's a problem, all right. Man, this affects me. This affects my family. This affects whatever, my faith. I want to do something about this. I'm not going to turn and run on that. So many people see the need, but only few respond to the challenges. Think about our own lives. How many times, maybe right now, what can are you kicking down the road? You just don't want to deal with it. This morning I was realizing I got to call this battery company again. I've been doing it for days. I'm like, I really don't want to do that. If I didn't have money out on it, I would say, forget it. Obviously I never would. But at the same time, and I'm thinking, okay, am I being too pushy? And then I'm like, no, it's my checkbook, right? No, I'm not being pushy. I need that money back, right? And so, otherwise I would have said, forget about it. I don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. I probably wouldn't even, if I would have had this problem, I probably wouldn't even exchange the battery. I probably would have said, whatever. I don't know what I've done. I'm like, I've got to deal with this, because if I don't, I got to deal with my wife, right? So I have to look at the problem. Which one is right? What recourse do I not want to take? But leaders see this issues, and then they respond to the challenges, and that's what separates leaders from the rest of the pack. We got an issue here. So many times people will come, and they'll come to one of the staff, they'll come to me, and it's like, Pastor, we really got a problem over in that bathroom over there. Every time I go in there, it seems like paper's everywhere. Okay, pick it up. Yeah. Don't come tell. That's something you can do, right? Leaders take the lead and take care of that. I went in the bathroom just a minute ago. We got a sports camp going on this week, and I was in the bathroom. It was like a bunch of kids were in there, right? Tape towels everywhere. I'm like, this looks terrible. We got a lot of folks coming in now, and I need to call Brian. And they're like, no, I can pick that up, pick it up, take care of it, right? They see the need and they take care of it. And leaders are developed when they do that, all right? When they see it and then they act on it. All right, here's the third principle then. I'm trying to move through this pretty quickly. When I look at this account here, I realize that leaders don't see themselves as anyone special. Leaders, good leaders, successful, don't see themselves as anyone special. At least that's not their goal. I think we should recognize the fact that God does appoint us for certain circumstances or situations in our lives and callings on our life, but we can't view that or distort that as being special, all right? Notice how David referred to himself in verse 32. He says, Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. What does he call himself? Thy servant. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. David didn't see himself as anyone special. He considered himself a servant. There were times in his life where David, he even referred to himself as a flea when he was running from Saul later on. He's like, I'm a flea compared to you. I'm nobody. And I think one of the greatest hindrances to being a successful person, a successful leader, is seeing ourselves above what the problems may call for, what the situation may call for. We see this in our government all the time. We see government officials all the time above the problems that they're supposed to be dealing with, right? Whether it's countywide, statewide, nationwide, a lot of our leadership sees them above the problem. I was thinking about the governor out in California. Remember during COVID, right? No dining out, and you got videos of him at some high-end, restaurant out there, celebrating a party. You're like, okay, really? You think about was it the governor of Michigan who was going out, taking their boat out on the lake or something, and they were supposed to be out and doing all sorts of stuff. And we see it all the time. They're above the law, so to speak. We're seeing it rampant. And as leaders, we have to avoid what I call the ENS syndrome, all right? ENS. It's the elevate and separate syndrome, all right? And what I mean by that is, as leaders, we elevate ourselves and think that we're something and then separate ourselves from the peons, right? The lower ones. That really doesn't apply to us. And that's where we get in a lot of trouble. You've seen that maybe in management, maybe in businesses, maybe in homes, your families, where people think, that doesn't apply to them. There's special treatment there. And good leaders don't see themselves as that. They don't look at themselves as anything special from those that they are leading. They understand the call in their life. Like I have to understand God's call in my life and positioning here as the pastor of this ministry. I understand. That is special, okay? But the position is special. It's not the person that's special. And I think that's sometimes where we can sometimes get that out of whack. Any thoughts there? You understand what I'm saying right there? The ENS syndrome, all right? Number 4 then. Looking at David's life right here and seeing the situation, leaders are not deterred by what others think they can't do. Good leaders, successful leaders, are not deterred by what others think they can't do. Verse 33 tells us this. Saul said to David, he'd already told him, I'm going to take care of this guy. He says, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him. You can't. There's no way. You're but a youth, man. He's been a man of war since he was a youth. Since he was a kid. You're just a kid. He's been fighting since he was a kid. And David said to Saul, well, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and they took the lamb out of the flock. Sometimes I think we don't think we're being good leaders because of the critics in our lives. Maybe we don't feel like we're being a good parent because of the criticism that comes. We're not being a good teacher or this or that because of the critics in our lives. And I think some of the hardest critique comes from those that are closest to us. I think spouses can really be a detriment to someone's leadership by never encouraging them and always degrading them and saying, that was terrible, that was the worst I've ever seen you do, that was awful. How long can you keep going like that, right? When you got somebody telling you that you can't do it. I told you this business wouldn't make it. I told you didn't have the experience. Well, how is that encouraging your spouse, right? When they're trying to go out and start that business or create that business or what have you. And good leadership aren't deterred by what others say they can't do. If that was the case, man, nobody would succeed. Because most everybody has a critic. You can't do that. You can't start that ministry. You can't go there. There's no way y'all can buy that. You see where that goes? We can't focus on what others say we can't do. And we can't be deterred by, in our God-called vision, to do those things that God calls us to do. So leaders aren't deterred by what others think they cannot do. There's more I could say on these things, but I'm not having to run through them. Number 5. Looking at verse 34 here, we see that leaders build on past experiences. Okay? Leaders build on past experiences. David said to Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep. There came a lion, a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. So the earlier victories in David's life allowed him to have confidence in his God-given ability. God gifted him. I think too often we have a short-term memory when it comes to doing things for God. We fail to remember the victories that God gives us along the way. And when it comes down to another obstacle, we don't think about, God brought me through that, God brought me through this and that. He can take care of this situation. And so when we get that other obstacle or a difficult time in our life surfaces, we forget what God has brought us through before. Even the disciples struggled with this. Yeah, I won't take time to go there, but in Mark 6, they just finished up feeding of the 5,000, all right? They took up, there were about 5,000 men, and then Jesus told them to get in the ship and go to the other side to the city of Bethesda, all right? And so they get on their ship. Jesus is not with them. He went up in the mountain. He's praying. The disciples, they literally left that day, got in the ship, and right there at the Sea of Galilee, and they're headed across. Storm comes up, right? Man, the wind's blowing, it's boisterous, and Jesus saw them toiling and rowing. The wind was contrary. About 4th of the watch of the night, he cometh unto them, walking upon the sea, and would have passed by them. Jesus goes out to meet them right where they're sea. You're out there on the ocean. I've preached about that many times. They don't know it's him. They don't recognize him. It says they saw him, and they were troubled. Immediately talked with them and said unto them, be of good cheer, as I, be not afraid. He went up with them to the ship, and the wind ceased, and they were sore amazed in themselves beyond measure and wondered. Notice this verse 52 says this, for they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their heart was hardened. The scripture tells us right off. Look, they just had an incredible miracle. Jesus took a few loaves of fish and fed thousands of people. You don't think he can get you across this, body of water right here? And I told you, the Sea of Galilee, when I was over there last year, you can be in the middle of the Sea of Galilee and look all the way around you and see the shore. It's that small. It's not like you couldn't see the other side. It's like looking at the Atlantic Ocean and looking towards England, all right? It's like, it's 7 miles, about 13 or 14 miles long. You can see the whole thing around it, all right? And you wonder how in the world can a storm that big come up? Well, that wind coming off the mountains down through there and hitting that water, it does create some pretty significant storms. But the fact of the matter is, it wasn't like they were in the middle of the ocean somewhere, right? You would have thought, man, God's going to take care of us. Where's Jesus at? As leaders, we cannot fail to build on the experiences that God allows us to have. That's why when we're going through difficulties, catalog those things when we come out the other side. And we'll use those in the days ahead and say, hey, baby, remember when we first got married? We had 2 nickels rubbed together, and we were praying, and God provided that for us. You remember when we first had the first child and first kid? You know what I'm saying? Go back to those times. Good leaders do that. All right, number 6. Leaders, good ones, envision the victory ahead of the battle. Look at verse 35. David says, I went out after him. He's talking about, he just told him in verse 34, hey, there was a lion, there was a bear. He said, I went out after them, and I smote him and delivered it out of his mouth. I took that sheep out of his mouth, and when he rose against me, I caught him by his beard, smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear. And then he says this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defiled the armies of the living God. You see it? He envisioned the victory. He saw it. He knew it was going to happen. He already saw it in his mind. He knew that God was going to allow him to prevail. He did not have this defeated attitude. I think too oftentimes those in leadership positions lose the battle before we ever get to the battlefield. We just know it's going to be tough. We just know it's going to be hard, and we're like, there's no way we're going to win this one. This is going to be terrible. We've had ball teams here, and man, the other team gets off the bus, and they're like, oh my word, and they're watching them, and they just keep bigger and bigger and bigger. It just defeats them right off the bat before they even first ball's ever snapped. We use this year to our advantage. Cooper Kennedy was helping. He played over at Loganville High School, and he taught with Colt, and he said, "Man, let's use this mind game to our advantage." I think maybe they did that over there. I don't really know the whole story right there, but we would take our guys out there. And I saw it with my own eyes, so I know this worked. I know this is how we got defeated before. But we would have, as the other teams there, we would have most of our wideouts and defensive back, cornerback, things like that. The smaller guys, not your linemen and that sort of thing, running backs, fullbacks. And we would have all of them out there running drills and doing things like that, getting ready as the teams were getting there and what have you. And they'd be out there 15, 20 minutes, and the other team's going, is this all they got? You can see it in their mind. We're going to smoke these chumps, And then all of a sudden, there was a certain point in time where the big boys would come walking out of the locker room. And I saw it every time, and the other team was going, you could see it in their mind. And I'm like, man, that was pretty smart. Because I knew how he used to beat us. And so you saw more numbers, and you saw bigger kids. And a lot of times, man, you go into the game, you're all right, there's no way we can beat this. They got more players, they got faster players, they got bigger players. Leaders do this all the time. There's no way we're going to win this thing. There's no way we can afford that. There's no way we can go after it. There's no way we can build that. And we get beat before we ever get to the battlefield. And good leaders see it happening. They envision it. If I use this property over here, I could see the success. I could see the ball fields being used. I could see some of the things that we're doing now way before we ever got to that point. I wasn't looking at it, man, there's no way we can do anything over that. I'm looking, okay, man, and there's so much more that would scare you if I was to say, hey, I can see it ahead of the battle, right? And unshakable leaders have confidence of mind that they will have a God-given success, all right? We show up at the game thinking we're going to lose, chances are we're going to lose, right? So good leaders see it in their mind first. They envision the victory ahead of the battle because we can't have this defeatist attitude. Number 7, leaders know where their strength or their source of power comes from. Leadership, especially obviously spiritual leadership, knows where their power comes from. Look, next verse 37. Verse 36, he says, hey, I can see it. It's going to happen. God's going to do to that giant what he did to that lion and that bear for me. He says, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion, out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of the Philistines. That's when Saul said, okay, go, man. The Lord be with you. David knew that he was a good shot with a sling. You know what I mean? Like, you have to imagine, if he killed a giant, if he killed a lion, or if he killed a bear, he killed one of those with a sling and a rock, you have to imagine that wasn't the first animal he ever shot with that thing. You know what I mean? He started off with little birds, He probably started off with just pine cones or tin cans. Yeah, there you go, tin cans. Coke cans, right? Little clay vessels, right? He was popping rocks at those, His mom was ever, why you keep hitting up the water bottle? He was knocking, maybe started going to birds and maybe some rabbits, squirrel or whatever they got over there, some of the ground squirrels. He was pretty good at that thing. He was gifted at it, obviously. And but he also knew this. That wasn't what was going to give him the victory. His expertise in a sling wasn't going to deliver him from the lion and the bear. He knew it wouldn't deliver it from the giant either. He said, the Lord that delivered me, He will deliver me. One of the worst things I think I do as a leader is to start to think that I have what it takes to be successful. When I get to that point where I think, I got this, I knock that in the head. That's when I fall flat on my face. That's when it doesn't work out. My power comes from the Lord, and I have to understand that and know that. Luke Wilkerson was here Sunday visiting. He was at the 10:30 service, and we were talking after service. He goes, "How do you like doing 2 services?" I love it. I said, "It's great." I said, we go to 3, I'd be fine. 4, that's fine. I enjoy it. He goes, "You like it?" I was like, "Yeah." And I said, the only bad thing about it is 2 things. One is when I get up at the 9:15 service and it's like not good. It's like falls flat on my face. I'm like, oh man, this is terrible. This is not a great message. And I have to think, I got to do this again. That's terrible. All right, that's a aggravating thing there. The other thing is when I preach the 9:15 and the Lord says, okay, that's not what I want you to do at 10:30 though. Really? And I've had to do that several times. Really? But I don't have another message, Lord. Just go to the office, pray. I'll take care of that. Okay. I hate when that happens, but I love it too, because I know if I'm being yielded to the Holy Spirit that it's going to work out. It's going to be good. The next service is going to be. But that's nerve-wracking. Because I like going into it being prepared, right? I like stepping up in front of 200 people and saying, all right, here's what, and I usually don't have the time to prepare. It takes a long time to prepare a message, and when you're having to change that in 5 to 10 to 15 minutes, different story. But when He does it, it works out good. And then the third time is bad when I get up at 9:15 and I'm like, man, all the jokes are landing. The emotion is there, and there's a good response. Like, rang the bell on that one. And then I go into the 10:30 service thinking I'm fixing to do the same thing, using the same inflections and everything, and it's just because what happens is I try to do it on my own power at that point. And the Holy Spirit moves in, blesses the first service, and I go into the second saying, okay, man, same thing, same on, and thinking I'm going to be the one that makes the difference, and that's terrible. I have to have the mindset. Anything that I'm able to do comes from the power of the Holy Spirit of God living within me. And if we can all keep that mindset, it will help us. Because we'll understand this is where our source of strength comes from. This is what makes me a good leader, because of what God is going to do. It's not because of me. Number 8, we got to move it quickly. Good leaders recognize their strengths and their weaknesses. They realize both of those, right? The next verse, in verse 38, as we walk down through this, Saul armed David with his armor. So in verse 37, he said, all right, go, and the Lord be with you. And then the next verse, Saul armed David with his armor, and he put a helmet of brass upon his head. He also armed him with a great coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And I can't do this. He started to take off, and then he's like, I can't. And David said to Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him. He said, I can't do this. He's getting fitted. He's getting his helmet on. He's getting his sword and his shield, and he's putting on all this armor. And you got to think, this is a shepherd boy. He's probably not even wearing very good shoes if he's wearing shoes. A little leather bound. Now he's being shod with all this stuff. He's a kid. Saul was. We know what was a characteristic of Saul. Absolutely, right? And we found him hiding in the baggage, right? He was a big man. He was a head taller than the average Israelite. So he himself was a big guy. David's a young guy. It's like Drake, wearing my tennis shoes or something. He's putting on my T-shirt, walking around like a dress. This is David, and he's going, wait a minute, whoa. This I can't do this. I'm going to get pounded. I can't move. I can't dodge. Right? He understood, hey, my strength is my agility. My strength is my ability to sling that shot. I can't even, what in the world? And he realized, if I'm trying to do this using something I'm not comfortable with, I'm going to get killed right here. And I think leadership, we have to understand, what are our weaknesses? What are the strengths that we have? And we have to play to those, and we have to be wary of the weaknesses. If we're not, I'm not super organized. I can dream, I can vision, I can have, and here's what I like to have. But when it comes down to how to making it happen, put the nuts and bolts together, I'm like, okay, let's go. Cole, you take it over, all right? Joe, Josh, this is what I want. Let's make it happen, right? They keep you on task. They're organized. That's a weakness of mine. I don't walk around going, I'm so unorganized. I never said that, did I? It didn't bother me. It bothered me. I wish I was, and I've gotten better. But I don't, I understand this. If I wasn't gifted with that, why am I going to force the issue and take all the time and energy to try to do that? Let me put some time and energy on some of my strengths and make me stronger and shore myself up with those weak areas of my life. I learned that a few years ago when it comes to staff and leadership. I'm like, one time I was wanting to try to make everybody well-rounded, right? If they weren't really good working with people, I'm like, okay, I'm going to teach them some people skills. And I'm going to realize, you know what? No, let's hire somebody with people skills. That doesn't have organizational skills, and let's take that guy or that woman and put her over here. And so you make your strong stronger, right? Yeah, and not worry too much about the weak side of things. Yeah, let's do what we can to shore that up. But what is the old saying? A jack of all trades is a master of none. And I think there's another phrase to that, but I don't know what it is. I think there's another statement to it. I think there's an additional thing to that. And so, to be an all-around kind of player, sometimes you lose the specialties, right? Baseball teams now, they don't, the professional teams don't just have a shortstop, do they? They don't just have a catcher. They don't have just a first baseman. They have the first baseman, right? They have the franchise shortstop. They have the elite catcher, all right? But when you're getting a team together, you just got to have 9 players, right? You just got to fill the squad, right? I need somebody. Can you squat? Okay, you're a catcher, right? And we fill the team. And once we fill the team as leadership, then we start. Okay, now I need the catcher, not just a catcher. And that's how I try to do it here in the ministry. And the same thing in our own lives. Guys, if y'all aren't the best with the finances and making sure they're staying in track, but your wife is better, there's no shame in that game. Let her help you there. Let her, organize that thing. You're still engaged. You're still involved. You still make decisions. But there's no shame in letting her or vice versa, handle that sort of thing, right? Any questions there? Any thoughts there? Anybody want to add to that? All right, you guys are good listeners, but I'm going fast, right? Number 9, another leadership principle here that I see out of David. We move to the very next verse, verse number 40 as we walk through this. Leaders work with what they have. Leaders work with what they have. Verse 40, he took his staff in his hand, because he took off his armor. Took his staff in his hand, chosen 5 smooth stones out of the brook, put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had, even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. Verse 48, he came to pass when the Philistines arose, came nigh, drew nigh to meet David. David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. So David worked with what he had. He had a sling. He had a little shepherd's bag there he was carrying his rocks in. He had a staff he was working with his sheep. And he's like, this is what I got. This is what I'm going to work with. Too many times we complain as leaders or Christians in general that, if we had more of this, if we had more money, if we had more personnel, if we had more staff, then we could do this or we could do that. Okay, but you got to start somewhere, right? We got to start somewhere. If it's just one person, 2 people, let's start right there. Let's work with what we have. If we got a limited amount of income, let's work with what we've got, and not, pout and leave off because we don't have everything that we think we need or should have as far as resources are concerned. Good leaders take what they've got and they do something with it. And so David, he goes to the giants coming at him, and he just takes off running. Let's go. He wasn't going, hey, okay, hold on. Look, let's keep our distance right here, we'll fight like this. No, he's running towards them. I can see him grabbing that thing out and getting that thing ready, He's taking what he's got and he's going to do something with it. Unshakable leadership is driven by impossible challenges. And just when there's something there that just seems so big, the leadership in us oftentimes says, it don't matter. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, right? Mindset. And then also, a good leadership dismisses inferior causes. We saw it in the previous verses. It speaks to the giant of his death for defying God and his people. David is not fighting this giant to marry the princess. He never mentions that. He's not fighting this giant so his dad ain't got to pay taxes anymore. He never mentions that. What's the only thing that he mentions as a reason why he's going to fight this giant? Because he's fighting the armies of the living God. And he took it personal. And I got to do something about this. I can do something about this. God's going to have to help me. God's going to take the resources that I do have, this little slingshot. He's going to have to do something with it. And by the way, when we take what we have and do something with it, God always supplies the next step. What happened to the giant? How did he die? How did he fall? What was the process there? Y'all remember?
Stone deep in his head.
Sunk in his head.
Fell to the ground.
Boom. He's on the ground.
David took his sword.
David took whose sword?
The giant's.
The giant's sword, because he didn't have one. He runs up there, grabs that sword, and just, completely separates the problem, right, from everything else, right? Divides the problem in half, right? Whether or not he was dead or not when the rock hit him, probably so. I think he was killed by the rock, based on what we read. The severing of the head and holding it up, that's the symbol of complete annihilation and victory. It's done. He's not sleeping, right? And of course, that was a cultural thing right there. He understands that what I'm doing here is not about the money. We got, as leadership, we got to understand what is the passion, what is the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing. That's not what drove him to defeat Goliath. And so by him doing that, it gives us the last principle. Leaders inspire others and encourage others to get in the fight. They inspire others and encourage others to get in the fight. Why I say that? Look at verse 49. Well, no, sorry, we'll start in 51. David ran, stood upon the Philistine, took his sword, drew it out of his sheath thereof, and slew him, cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. Now look what's taking place. And the men of Israel and of Judah arose. They shouted, and they pursued the Philistines all the way to the valley and the gates of Ekron there. The wound of the Philistines fell that day, from city to city to city. Now, they were scared before. They were hunkered down, right? We can't fight that man. But when they saw that big old ugly head being held up, sword glistening in the sun with the blood dripping off of it, kind of did something for them, didn't it? It was a shot in the arm. Let's go, right? And that's sometimes all those folks in our lives that we're leading need us to do. They need us to see the need, take action, run towards the problem. Don't shy away from it. Use what we've got. Take care of business. Understand that God's the source of our power. And when they see us doing that, they'll want to get in on that. Everybody likes to be everybody's for the winner, aren't they? I was, Sunday afternoon, the teenagers all went to the Braves game. And I guess all my kids went with them, Cole and Ashley, and of course their youth workers, and Hunter and Elena went. They liked the Braves, and they went as chaperones and a lot of other people. Well, during the Braves games, they have these little in-between inning games. Y'all ever seen the freeze? They have, y'all know what the freeze is? So the freeze is some super fast guys in this outfit, and in between innings, sometimes they'll have somebody from the stands come down and race the freeze, and if you win, you get stuff. And they'll let them take off all the way around the warning track, all the way around back to the home plate, and they'll give them like half a field or something. You know what I'm saying? They let the people go a long way, and then the freeze gets to take off, and he catches most everybody, And they'll do the kissing game. You've seen that, and then they'll do the thing on the screen where they have 3 baseball helmets and hats, and they have a baseball underneath one of them, and they'll, you're trying to figure out which one it is, after they do it. Well, they have another one that's called Steal the Base Challenge. And they pick somebody from the field, from the stands, and they start in right field in the very corner of the stadium, all the way in outfield in the corner. And there's a base behind second base. And they got 20 seconds to run from the corner to behind second base and back, picking up that base that they steal, whatever. And it's just a, advertisement or whatever. And they came by Travis and Kayla, who was part of the group, and said, hey, do y'all want to do this? And they're like, no. And everybody like, Hunter will. Hunter's like, yeah, I will. So he calls me, and I'm on the phone, and he's like, guess where I'm going? I'm like, I have no idea. Down to the field. What are you doing? He goes, yeah, I'm going down there. I'm fixing to do the Steal the Base Challenge. I'm like, are you serious? He's like, yeah. I'm like, dude. I said, he said, I got 20 seconds, Dad. I said, son. He goes, I'm going to make you prouder than you are of Cole. He always says that. He always says that all the time. I was like, well, dude, that's fine. I said, Cole wouldn't understand that dad stuff, because that's his deal. Now, Hunter's a dad. He's always like, yeah, Dad, I'm doing this. Cole would understand it. It's dad stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I know. So that's his edge now. But anyway, he called me. I'm on the way down there. And he said, I got 20 seconds to make it. I said, son, don't you quit on me. I'm on the phone. I'm like, I don't care if you throw up. I don't care if you trip and fall. I said, do not. I said, you got thousands of people watching you. Literally, thousands. I said, don't you quit. Give it everything you've got. He said, I'm winning this thing, Dad. I'm like, whatever, okay. I said, so make sure somebody's got it on video. And so I called Cole. I was like, hey, video this thing, because I know he's there, And then I had 4 or 5 videos sent to me, actually, right after that. So I see this video coming back to me. I don't think I have Apple TV here. I'd show it to you. I don't. I should have done that. Anyway, I got this video. And it's 3, 2, 1, go. And all of a sudden, you see Hunter. And he's on this big screen right there at the Braves game. And I'm, and everybody's watching him. He's booking it. He's running. He takes off. He doesn't slip. He gets to the second base. He was really afraid he's going to slip and fall. He said, I was afraid the main thing I was worried about was slipping when I take off and slipping when I got back to the second base. He said, it's unbelievably grippy. He said, it was really, really tacky at second base. I didn't fall or whatever. He gets it, and it's 20 seconds. So he's there before the 10 seconds, before halfway. He grabs it, turns around, he's booking it back. He made it back with like almost 3 seconds left to spare. The guy told me, he said, that's the fastest we've ever had anybody do it. So he won the challenge. He got $100 to go spend on a beer somewhere. I don't know what it was. I think it was a Coors Light challenge. I really think it was. But I think he got a $100 gift certificate to go to a restaurant, a high-end restaurant in downtown. That's what he got. It was a Coors Light. He held the base up and it said Coors Light. And I'm like, excellent. But anyway, of course, he didn't know all that. But he sold the base. He won back. And so I said, how did it feel? He goes, Dad, this is the most amazing thing I've ever done in my life. I'm like, what are you talking about? He says, Dad, the best way I can explain it. He said, it's kind of like when you're watching a college football game. And there's a catch out in the flats, or the running back breaks loose. And he's getting ahead of the crowd, and he's going to score a touchdown. And if you've ever watched a game or ever been to a game, the rumble starts coming up because people start screaming and hollering because it's fixing to happen. He says, I was heading back, and he said, I could feel it. I could feel it, Dad. It was in my head, in my ears, and it was just like, because the whole crowd started screaming and hollering and cheering. And he says, it was amazing. He says, it was unreal. That's what he was trying to tell me about. He said, I'm walking back. He said, Dad, I'm walking up the platform. He said, I'm literally got my hands out, and people are going, they're hollering, they're high-fiving him. He says, it was just a very surreal moment. And I was like, here's why everybody loves a winner, especially when you beat the man. You know what I mean? Especially when you beat somebody else's money that just took 20 of yours times 8 or however many kids you got there, right? Everybody wants a winner. When I watch those football challenges, the Dr. Pepper challenge at the halftime, I'm like, please, kid, win this thing. Please take $1 million from Dr. Pepper. They can afford it, Take it for your college. We're all hollering for that guy, right? And so it was a really neat deal for him. But the point I was trying to make is, everybody loves that winner. Everybody wants to get involved on that. And when he started coming to the finish line, that's when people started just erupting and saying, "You got it, come on, don't you quit." All the videos, you could hear our youth group. They're starting, and a lot of them you could hear going, "That's Hunter! What's he doing?" Because they didn't know he was down there. You know, everybody's kind of freaking out because they're like, "What in the world? How did he even get down there? What's the deal? How did he get that jersey?" and all this kind of stuff. But by the time he gets through racing and all that, and they're all going, "Hi-ya!" I said, "Hunter, you will go down in Victory Baptist lore. Every time a kid goes to a Braves game from now till they're 100, they're going to think, hey, well, I remember one time we had a kid from our church, and he had that Still Base challenge, you know, and he won it, you know, because everybody loves a winner. Everybody wants to get in on that action, right? And so that's the point that leadership makes there. When you go after it, and when you have some victories, it's going to bring others along, and they're going to want to get engaged on it. Maybe they were fearful from whatever reason to get engaged initially. When they see, hey, we can make some headway here, headway is what I did there, we can make some headway there, then we can others get on board, right? Amen? You guys are good listeners today. Father, thank you for your love. Thank you for your word. And thank you for things like this that we can learn through David, God, which is an incredible leader. And God, take some of these leadership principles and make application in our own lives, Father, to be the best that we can be for you, for your honor, for your glory. God, whether it just be leading our home, our spouse, God, whether it just be a leader in our own life, God, help us understand these things, that we can just take what we've got and work with, and we can't get down on the things that we don't have, or the talents that we don't have, or the resources we don't have. And God, we'll just use what you've blessed us with, knowing that when we get to that point, you're going to provide the sword to finish the job, or whatever it takes. Lord, I pray, God, that we will be effective in our leadership, effective in our lives as testimonies, so others will want to get involved as well in the Christian life. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. You guys. We hope that was an encouragement to you tonight. You may want to know more information. Maybe you have some questions. Maybe you'd like to pray with somebody and talk to somebody about some spiritual matters in your life. We have a pastoral care line, and we would love for you to be able to call. We have pastors standing by right now to be able to take those calls and assist you. We also have Wednesday night program for our teens as well as our young people. We have an Awana program here, and perhaps you or someone you know might like to be a part of that. You can find this and a whole lot more information on our website, VictoryBaptist.Church. God bless you and have a great evening.